When humans opened their eyes for the first time on the newly reshaped Earth, they were not welcomed as a free species. They were born to serve the gods from the sky. The aliens viewed humans as a hybrid creation, intelligent enough to work, weak enough to control the sky. In those days was not the blue we know today. It was a permanent gray, torn apart by colossal objects hovering silently above the land. Glowing with a cold, predatory light, humans were gathered in masses. They were marked. Devices were fused onto their wrists and the backs of their necks, glowing metallic implants that acted as both surveillance tools and instruments of punishment. A single thought of resistance, a sudden flash of light, a body convulsing, pain ripping through every nerve. They were forced to build structures far beyond the natural ability of a primitive species. Towering pyramids of stone, cities carved with impossible precision, massive pillars pointing toward the sky, not monuments, but transmitters sending signals deep into space. Humans did not know what they were building. They only knew that if they collapsed, they would never rise again. Energy whips cracked across their backs. Cold metallic sounds echoed whenever a body fell. Blood mixed with sand, sinking into the soil, land that would one day be called sacred. But the aliens made a fatal mistake. They created humans using fragments of their own intelligence, yet failed to erase humanity's ability to observe, remember, and learn. At first, it was only stolen glances, quick looks when the overseers turned away. Humans began to realize these devices were not magic. They had structure. They followed rules. A small group was selected as technical servants. They were forced to stand close to alien craft. Energy pillars and control chambers. They cleaned. They carried materials. They bowed their heads. But their eyes never stopped recording. They learned how light moved inside crystalline cores. They noticed repeating symbols on control panels. They overheard alien communication, a language not spoken by mouths, but transmitted through thought itself. And in the darkest nights, when alien vessels departed Earth for deep space supply routes, humans began to experiment. A stone placed slightly out of alignment. A symbol rotated the wrong way. An energy circuit interrupted for a single heartbeat. No one died. No punishment followed. For the first time, humans understood even gods can make mistakes. In secret, they began crafting crude tools that mimicked alien technology, stone blocks cut with unnatural accuracy, resonant structures that made massive objects feel lighter than air, rituals that were not rituals at all, but primitive energy experiments. Knowledge was passed by word of mouth, never written, never recorded, shared only with the trusted, because a single wrong word could erase an entire tribe. Then, the moment arrived. A surveillance device failed. A labor zone slipped out of control for a few minutes. And in that brief chaos, a human hand touched alien weaponry for the very first time. Not to attack, but to understand. An energy beam fired off target. A hovering craft shuddered. The sky screamed, a sound never heard before, as if the universe itself had roared. The aliens realized it too late. The creatures they had created were learning faster than expected. From slaves, humans were becoming a threat. And from that moment on, this was no longer a story of masters and servants, but a war between the creators and what had escaped their control.